Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to show you how to serve up a React app from CloudFront with an S3 origin. So this is right here. We can see we're on CloudFront.net, which is basically just a CloudFront distribution that I've spun up. And when you visit this URL, what's served up is this React app, which is just a default create React app with Vite that I'll show you how to build that as well. And you can see everything's working. So for example, the JavaScript makes this count button go. And we're going to be building all of this, including the React app, completely from scratch. So this is just an example of what it looks like we're going to be building. So this is all our Terraform code in here. This is our React code in here. And I'm going to go over things like a little bit of a preview of what an origin is, CloudFront, all that stuff. If you like content like this, please like and subscribe. Also follow me on Medium, where this code will all be hosted. So if you want to find all this code, go into the description. You'll see my Medium link, which is also just my domain, WittCode.com. So before we start building this project though, a common question I want to address is why do we need S3 with CloudFront? Why can't we just use CloudFront alone? And this is because CloudFront is a CDN, or a content delivery network. This means that it's not a file store. So what it needs is an origin to pull content from. And in this setup, S3 is going to be our origin. So S3 will handle or will store all the files that we need for our React app, whereas CloudFront will have edge locations, which is basically servers throughout the globe that can serve it up. It enforces HTTPS by default. We can enable and configure some caching and also some origin access control policies, all of which we'll see throughout this tutorial. But now to get started, first thing we're going to do is build our React app. And we're going to do this very simply by just using Vite. And so this command right here is just going to be npm create Vite, and then at latest, we're going to use a React template, and we're going to call the project Vite React. So I just click enter here. We'll have to install some packages. I'm just going to say no to these experimental things. And then what happened for me is I'm using node 18. So I need to bump up my version, which I'm going to do using NVM. So now I'm using node version 22.1.2.0. So what I'm going to do is go into the Vite React app and run npm install. And then after doing this, I'm going to run npm run build. And what this will do is it will create our dist folder right here. So we have our index file, our assets, all of which we're going to store in S3. And then of course we'll have CloudFront sitting in front to serve all this up. So now let's start working on our Terraform code. And so I'm going to create the files. So I'm going to create a folder. I'm just going to call it Terraform. This is where our Terraform stuff is going to be. And we're going to have a provider.tf, or let me just create all our files. So what we have is our files are going to be what we're doing. So our files are going to separate out the logic. So we have CloudFront for CloudFront, S3 for S3, so on. But what we're going to start out with is our provider. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paste this code in here and go over what's going on. So here we're setting a required Terraform version to be greater than or equal to 1.5. And then for our providers, we're specifying that we need the official AWS version, major version 6.0 or greater. And then here I'm going to configure the provider with the region, so the region to deploy our infrastructure in, and the profile to use to spin up all this infrastructure. Now let's start. The first section we're going to work on is let's work on our S3, so getting our S3 bucket set up. So once again, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paste all this in here. And once again, all of this will be on my Medium site, so go link in the description. You'll find all this code, but I'll just do my best to go over what's going on here. So right now, what we're going to do first is create our bucket. So all this does is create a bucket, and this is the name of the bucket, which we will get from our variables. Then we have a public access block. And so basically, by default, S3 buckets are private, but we want to just ensure that all public access is blocked. And this is more of a demonstration, demonstrate that no one should be accessing our S3 bucket directly. Only CloudFront will be able to actually access it. So if someone wants to get something from our S3 bucket, they have to go through there. So this makes it completely private. Then after this, what we need to do is create a bucket policy. And what this does right here, so data and then AWS IAM policy document, is it will generate a JSON IAM policy. So a policy is basically just a JSON document. And this, what it says right here is it avoids handwriting it, so it makes it easier to update in Terraform. And so what we're essentially saying is that we are going to allow a get object on the resource, so on our S3 bucket. What we're going to allow, so principals is who we're going to allow essentially, which could be an IAM user, a service, and our service is going to be CloudFront. So we're going to allow the principal CloudFront to get a bucket, and also note how we have this -- here, so it's going to be able to get anything in our bucket, but only if this condition is that the string or the ARN, which is basically the Amazon resource number or a unique identifier for an Amazon resource, equals our CloudFront distribution ARN. So this right here policy which we will then attach to our bucket, makes it so S3 will only allow CloudFront to get to access it. And so then just don't forget to attach it to our bucket. So we have our policy, which is this .json, which comes from, of course, this right here. And now after we've done that, let's go to CloudFront. And so CloudFront is going to be the majority of our Terraform code, I would say. So I'm going to paste this in. Once again, go to my Medium if you want to follow along with the code. And essentially what we have right here is the first thing we're going to do is create something called an origin access control, or OAC. And what this essentially does is configures the access to the origin. So CloudFront is accessing our origin, which is the S3 bucket, and this is configuring it. It's basically saying always sign the requests with SIG-v4, and this essentially makes it so the requests are signed with our origin access control, and this makes it so S3 stays private and we can just use CloudFront to access it. Next, we actually set up our CloudFront distribution, which we call CDN. Our default object will be our HTML file, which is usually React apps are just a single HTML file, with then the JavaScript changes what's displayed. So our default root object is just going to be index.html. Next, we configure our origin, which is going to be our S3 bucket, which we access right here. So this is the S3 bucket we created on our s3.tf file. We, of course, then need an origin access control, which we secure right here, and we just give it an ID or a name. And here is where we can specify some cache behavior. So essentially, we're only allowing the methods to be get and head that are sent on to the origin. Same with the only ones that are cache. And this right here redirects to HTTPS. Basically means if someone tries to access, say, CloudFront on HTTP, it will redirect them to HTTPS as opposed to just stopping the request altogether, which is another option. Then we have these forward values, which is basically what values are forwarded to the origin. And then down here, we have our cache control, which basically configures the caching between the origin and CloudFront. So basically, when will CloudFront serve out something that's cached as opposed to refetching it from the origin or refetching something new. Next, we have our just restrictions, and we are saying no geo-blocking. So basically means that anyone throughout the globe can access our distribution. And this right here, viewer certificate, you can add your own custom domain one, which I'll have a video on that coming out, so look out for that. But this essentially just uses the CloudFront default SSL certificate, which is very easy to set up and works just as well. Next, let's just go into our variables, and I'm going to define them here. So I'm going to have a region, it's going to be US2, which is London, and then we're going to have our default profile, which is Terraform, and then the name of our bucket. Note that this is the name of our S3 bucket, and note that it has to be globally unique. So if someone else is using this bucket, you'll have to use a different one, so you can just tag on something like 123, and that probably isn't taken. Next, let's just configure some outputs, and these are just what CloudFront or what Terraform will output to the console after everything's been set up. So this is going to be our CloudFront URL and also our bucket name, and we'll use this to just access CloudFront. So it's basically just an easier way to access things, and that's really all it takes to set all this up. So let's navigate into our Terraform directory. First thing we have to do is run Terraform init, which will initialize everything, including installing the plugins that we require, such as AWS. And so we've done that. Next thing we need to do is let's run Terraform. So I'm going to do Terraform. First, I'm going to do a Terraform format, which will format everything. And then let's do a validate. Everything looks good. And then let's just do an apply. And I'm just going to say auto approve, so we don't have to click yes. And note that this may take a while because CloudFront is a pretty heavy resource. So it sometimes, I think on average for me, it probably takes around 4 to 5 minutes. So just sit back and wait for that to happen. Okay, there we are. So for me, it took about 3 minutes and 30 seconds, or 3 minutes and 31, it seems like. And so now that we've done that, all we need to do, or let's just visit this URL first. So right now we can see access denied, and that's because this will be going to our S3 bucket, and we basically just don't have anything there, so we're going to get access denied. So what we want to do now is just upload our React app to S3, which we can do with this command right here, which is saying sync up our dist folder with Terraform output, or S3-Terraform output, our bucket name, which is basically taking this value, substituting this in, and delete basically means remove anything if it's already there. But I believe we will need to move our dist folder into Terraform. So drag and drop that right into here. And then if we just run this command, let's see what happens here. So it looks like everything was uploaded. So if we go back in here and let's refresh the page, here we are. So this is our React app that's being served up from CloudFront, which is contacting S3. And we see our JavaScript's been loaded too because this count button is working. And that's all there really is. So that's everything here, although that's everything here, except if you want to tear everything down, note that what you need to do is you need to remove everything from S3. So if you want to do that, say you want to run Terraform destroy, just turn everything down. First, what you have to do is run this, which will remove everything from the S3 bucket, and then you can tear everything down. Because if you tear everything down with stuff in S3, it'll stop deleting S3 because it'll say the bucket isn't empty. So it'll stop that from happening essentially. I want to thank you for liking and subscribing. Check out my software and courses in the description. Follow me on Medium and take it easy.